The battle of the Nixian expanse was over. What remained was the quiet, arduous work of survival. Wounded Accord ships, some missing entire sections, others trailing clouds of frozen coolant, limped towards the staging point near the science station. Tugs, small and industrious, latched onto hulks too damaged to move under their own power. The space was filled with the orderly, sad traffic of recovery. The Ansdaean did not join this flow. It held its position, a silent, gray sentinel. Its weapon ports were closed, its shield glow diminished to a passive shimmer. It watched. On its bridge, the atmosphere had shifted from the focused quiet of combat to the patient calm of a job completed. Crew members spoke in normal tones, reporting system checks and minor repairs. Captain Schull finally rose from his command chair. His muscles felt stiff. The weight of the decision of revealing the Dian to the galaxy had been heavy. Now he carried the weight of the aftermath. A request for a formal conference had come from Admiral T-Ho. It was time to step out from behind the armor. "Mi Kyung, you have the bridge," he said. "Hannah, you're with me. And link in Dr. Sumin from the Orb of Insight. She can provide context." In a secure briefing room aboard the Daeon, a holographic link was established. On one side, Shul and Hannah, seated at a simple metal table. On the other, the image of Admiral T-Ho, looking every bit of his age and strain, and beside him, Dr. Sumin, who seemed to be trying to balance professional decorum with sheer scientific excitement. "Captain Schull," T-Ho began, his translated voice formal. "First, again, the gratitude of the Galactic Accord is eternal. You saved billions of lives today." Chaul inclined his head. "We are part of the Accord, Admiral. The defense of it is our duty. We are only glad we could arrive in time." The pleasantries were necessary, but everyone felt the unspoken question hanging in the air. T-Ho, never one for excessive ceremony, finally asked it. "Your vessel, the Daeon, it represents a technological leap that our finest minds considered theoretical for centuries. My question is not one of accusation, but of understanding. Why was this capability never shared? Why did humanity let itself be seen as less?" Chu leaned back, choosing his words carefully. Su Min watched him, her recorder silently active. "Admiral," he said, "a tool is defined by its use. If we had paraded this technology, it would have become a tool of politics, of intimidation, of alliance building through fear. It would have changed everything. We chose not to let it. We built the Daeon and others like it for one purpose, to be a final argument, to exist so that no one would ever force us to use it." Hannah spoke up, her voice softer but clear. "Our research into these systems has been open, in principle. The papers on gravitational distortion, on magnetic acceleration, were in the shared databases. The theoretical foundations were there." Su Min nodded vigorously. "They were. We read them. We dismissed them as elegant math, centuries away from practical application. We thought you were dreamers." She paused, a flush of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "We were wrong. You were builders. We are a cautious people," Chul continued. "We saw the path of constant military escalation many in the galaxy walk. We chose a different one. We built a shield so vast, so strong, that we hoped to forget it was there. Today, the Kathrek tested that shield. They found it was a wall." T-Ho was silent for a long moment. The explanation was so fundamentally human, it was disarming. They hadn't hidden their strength out of malice or a plan for domination, but out of a desire for peace so profound they had weaponized their own restraint. It was a concept his warrior's mind struggled to wrap around, yet he found he believed it. And now? T-Ho asked. "The galaxy has seen the wall. Nothing will be the same." "That is true," Shul acknowledged. But our intent does not change. The Dayan will return to its patrol route on the edge of human space. We will not station it over Accord worlds. We will not use it to settle disputes. Its purpose remains what it was today, a last resort. The meeting continued, shifting to practical matters coordination for the damaged ships, sharing of sensor data on the K-Threk debris for analysis. Hana provided concise technical details to Su Min, who listened with rapt attention. The fear in the room, the tension of the unknown, slowly dissipated. It was replaced by a weary, mutual respect. Later, on the observation deck of the Orb of Insight, Jin had been summoned by Su Min. He floated beside her, looking out at the battlefield. The wreckage was stark under the distant sun's light. And there, in the middle of it all, was the Dayan, massive and still. "They're leaving soon," Su Min said softly. "It feels strange," Jin replied, "to have something that powerful just fly away." "That's the point, Jin. If they stayed, they'd be overlords. By leaving, they remain allies." She pointed to a screen showing the Accord recovery efforts. "They gave us back the victory. They let us clean up our own mess. That is a greater show of strength than any weapon." On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Tejo gave the final order. "All units, this is the Admiral. Secure from general quarters. Begin phased withdrawal to home stations. The Nixian expanse is secure." As the order went out, the Dayan's engines glowed once more, that deep, resonant blue. It began to move, turning with a slow, ponderous grace that spoke of incredible mass. It did not jump to slipstream immediately. It simply powered away from the battlefield, a continent drifting into the deeper dark. Every ship, from the smallest tug to the flagship, paused in its work to watch it go. There were no celebratory flashes of light, no fanfare. There was only the silent, respectful observation of a power that had chosen to be merciful. Chin watched until the Dane was just a speck against the stars, then until it was gone entirely. The space where it had been felt empty, but also lighter. The threat was over. The protector had departed. The Galactic Onlookers were left with the debris, with their saved lives, and with a new humbling truth. Humanity had not been primitive. They had been peaceful by choice. And the choice, when finally made, had been to descend not as conquerors, but as guardians. The stunned silence lingered, but now it was mixed with a profound and cautious gratitude. The galaxy had learned that day that the most terrifying species were not the ones who brandished their claws, but the ones who sheathed them, knowing they never needed to draw them at all. The silence that settled over the Nixian expanse was not peaceful. It was the quiet of shock, of a world rewritten. The K-Threk swarm, its neural heart destroyed, had dissolved into chaos. Isolated clusters of fighters still lashed out, but they were like the twitching limbs of a dead beast, dangerous, but without purpose. The remaining Accord ships, breathing a collective sigh that seemed to ripple through the vacuum, began the grim work of mopping up. On the bridge of the GCS Resolute, the mood had shifted from despair to a kind of buzzing disbelief. Jin listened to the comms traffic, which was now filled with relieved damage reports and requests for tow, rather than final prayers. He glanced at the main viewer, where the human ship, the Dahan, held its position. It looked less like a warship now, and more like a cliff face, a permanent and imposing feature of the local space. The initial burst of joy he'd felt was cooling, replaced by a slow-dawning awe at the sheer, casual power the vessel had displayed. Admiral Tejo's voice cut through the murmur on the bridge. "All vessels, commence recovery operations. Prioritize life pods and crippled ships. Maintain a respectful distance from the human vessel." The word respectful was chosen with care. It was not fear, exactly. It was the acknowledgement of a new and overwhelming reality. Inside the Dayan, the routine continued. The battle was not over until the space was secure. At her engineering station, Hana monitored the ship's systems with a critical eye. The shield matrix had absorbed tremendous energy, but her screens showed green across the board. The gravimetric dispersers, her life's work for the past 5 years, had performed flawlessly. A part of her swelled with quiet pride, but her face showed only professional focus. A direct channel from the Accord engineering cores pinged on her console. The face of a Vel engineer, his frills twitching with nervous excitement, appeared. "This is Senior Engineer Kaler, attached to Science Station Orb of Insight. We are recording unprecedented energy dispersal readings from your shield systems. If it is not a breach of security, could you elucidate the principle? Our models are insufficient." Hannah considered for a moment. Captain Scholl had authorized limited technical disclosure. The goal was not mystery, but stability. "Of course, Senior Engineer," she said, her voice calm. "The primary principle is layered gravitational distortion. We do not block energy. We bend space around the ship to create a series of deflective planes. The incoming energy is shunted along these planes, diluted and converted to waste heat, which is then cycled through our coolant loops." She brought up a simplified diagram, showing the honeycomb pattern of distorted space. It is highly efficient against directed energy and reasonably effective against kinetics below a certain threshold. On the other end, Collar's frills stood straight out. The concept was brilliant in its simplicity and impossible in its execution. The power required to maintain such a field. "Your reactors are a proprietary design," Hana finished gently. "But suffice to say, the shield's power draw is a sustainable fraction of our total output." She saw the Vel engineer's large eyes blink rapidly. She had just told him that the mountain of power they'd glimpsed was merely the peak of a much larger mountain buried beneath the surface. On the Resolute, Jin was patching this technical feed to the main command log. He listened, understanding only 1 word in 3, but grasping the magnitude. They weren't just stronger. They were operating on a different set of physical rules. A young Terran Coms officer beside him leaned over. "They make it sound so easy," she whispered, her charming voice subdued. "Like they're just tidying up." That was exactly what it looked like on the tactical displays. The Dayan was not chasing down the last Kathrak fighters. Instead, it was methodically identifying the remaining clusters of organized resistance small pockets where a mid-level bioship was trying to reassert control. For each pocket, the response was the same .ni-kyung on the Dayan's bridge would designate the coordinating vessel. Target identified. Corvette-class bioship, coordinating 12 fighters. Captain Scholl would give a nod. Remove it. A secondary plasma lance would fire. Not the overwhelming blast used on the cruisers, but a precise beam that would slice the Corvette in two or pierce its command ganglion. Instantly, the fighters around it would scatter, becoming easy prey for the regrouping Accord forces. It was a clinical dismantling of the enemy's will to fight. Each strike was a lesson, delivered without anger or haste. The Galactic Onlookers watched, and the lesson was learned. Human warfare was not about passion or glory. It was about systems engineering, applied to the problem of violence. It was frighteningly clean. Chin found himself opening a private, low-power channel to the Orb of Insight. "Su Min? It's Jin. Are you seeing this?" Su Min's face appeared, pale but animated with scientific fervor. "Seeing it? Jin, I am recording it. This is the most significant technological event in 200 cycles. Their efficiency is... it's beautiful. Do you realize they haven't wasted a single shot? Every unit of energy has had a calculable effect on the enemy's command structure. It's scary," Jin admitted quietly, so his colleagues wouldn't hear Su Min's expression softened. Yes, it is. But is a surgeon's scalpel scary? It is if it's aimed at you. Today, it was aimed at the cancer. She paused, looking at something off-screen. They are not attacking the scattered fighters. They are leaving them for the Accord to handle. That is a deliberate choice. They are giving us back our agency, our victory. It is a gesture of respect. Jin hadn't thought of it that way. He watched as a flight of Vel interceptors, emboldened, swooped in to destroy a group of disoriented K-Thrak skirmishers. The Dayan did not intervene. It simply watched, a silent guardian. Back on the Dayan's bridge, Chol received the latest report from Mi Kyung. The last command cluster has been neutralized. Remaining K-Thrak forces are below 5% of original strength and completely disorganized. The Accord fleet has the situation in hand. Very good, Chol said. Stand down from battle stations. Shift to watch rotation. Keep the shield at routine strength. He leaned back in his chair, the first sign of relaxation since they had arrived. The job was done. Throughout the Accord fleet, the realization spread. The human ship was not taking over. It was standing down. It had intervened with brutal force to break the enemy's back, and then it had deliberately stepped back to let the Accord finish the fight and claim the space. The relief that followed was warmer, less tinged with anxiety. The awe remained, but the first, cold spike of fear began to thaw. Admiral Tai-ho understood the gesture perfectly. It was a masterstroke of diplomacy, wrapped in a demonstration of supreme force. The humans had not come to dominate. They had come to correct an imbalance, and then to remind everyone that they preferred to be in the background. The message was clear. We have this. Do not make us use it again. As the Accord recovery shuttles began to dart between wounded ships, and the first coordinated salvage operations started, the Dayan became a fixed point in the sector. It was no longer a terrifying weapon, but a symbol of a threshold that had been crossed. The galaxy had always wondered what humanity's true potential was. Now the onlookers knew. And the most stunning part was not the weaponry, but the restraint that followed it. The battle was over, and the long, complex aftermath had just begun. The silence that followed the destruction of the K-Thrak hive ship was deeper than the vacuum of space. It was a silence of pure shock, etched into the minds of every watching being. On the bridge of the Accord flagship, the GCS Resolute, Admiral Tai-ho felt his compound eyes straining to take in the sensor data. The debris cloud was still expanding, a monument to a power he could not quantify. The human ship, the Dayan, hung in the void before it, untouched, its gray armor cold and silent once more. It was not celebrating. It was simply waiting. On the command channel, the whispers returned, hushed and reverent. One shot. Their shields. The beams did nothing. What are they? Tai-ho forced himself to focus. The immediate, annihilating threat of the lead hive ship was gone, but the battle was not over. The K-Thrak swarm, though stunned, was vast. The second hive ship was falling back, regrouping with a cluster of cruisers. The instinct of the K-Thrak was not one of fear, but of predatory reassessment. They were identifying a new apex creature in the fight. This is Admiral Tai-ho to all Accord units. He transmitted, his voice finding its familiar, commanding tone. Maintain defensive formation. The human vessel has taken the initiative. We will support as directed. The last words tasted strange. For cycles, humanity had been a junior member, seeking guidance. Now, the most powerful fleet commander in the sector was offering to support them. Inside the Dayan, the mood was one of detached professionalism. At her tactical station, Mi Kyung watched the enemy's movements. The remaining hive ship is rallying its escorts. They're adopting a synaptic web formation. They'll try to overwhelm us with coordinated fire from multiple vectors, aiming to find a shield weakness. At the engineering station, Hana nodded, her eyes on her own screens. Shield modulation is active. The gravimetric dispersers will redistribute localized impacts across the entire shield matrix. Their current weapons cannot focus enough energy to puncture it. She said it as matter-of-factly as someone reporting the weather. Captain Chul listened, his gaze fixed on the holographic tactical display between them. The K-Thrak were predictable. Their tactics were based on brute force and psychic swarm coordination. Against the Accord's finesse, it was devastating. Against the Dayan's monolithic durability, it was a nuisance. They are testing us, Chul said. They want to see if we can be distracted, if we have a blind spot. We will show them we do not. He turned to Mi Tiang. Designate the 6 heaviest cruisers supporting that hive ship. Sequential firing solutions for the secondary batteries. We will remove its teeth before we take its head. Aye, Captain. Locking targets now. On the Resolute, Jin was rerouting communication lines, his hands shaking slightly. A new, clean audio-video channel had been opened from the human ship to the Accord command network. On a secondary screen, he could see the bridge of the Dayan. It was startlingly ordinary. The humans there looked focused, not triumphant. The captain, a man with a calm face named Chul, was speaking quietly to his crew. Then, the human ship moved again. Along its flanks, a series of turrets, smaller than the massive Mac cannon, but still formidable, swiveled with mechanical precision. They glowed a fierce orange, then unleashed a volley. These were not the silent, kinetic kill shots of the point defense or the world-ending punch of the main gun. These were high-intensity plasma lances, searing bolts of contained starfire. Each bolt found its mark. The Ye-Threk cruisers, each a vessel that would require the concentrated fire of an entire Accord squadron to disable, were struck. The effect was brutally efficient. The plasma burned through their chitinous hulls, piercing deep into their power cores. One by one, the 6 cruisers flared brightly and then fell dark, their structures cracked open and venting silent fire into the void. It took less than 10 seconds. The second hive ship, now isolated, pulsed with frantic, panicked light. It began a full retreat, pushing its bioengines to their limit, trying to hide behind the bulk of its remaining smaller ships. Admiral Teo watched, a complex emotion stirring within him. It was relief, yes. His fleet, his people, were being saved. But it was also a profound disquiet. This display of force was so absolute, so effortless, it bordered on the obscene. He keyed a private channel to the science station. Dr. Su Min, your analysis, can they sustain this? Su Min's face appeared on his screen, her expression one of academic awe. Admiral, our scans indicate their reactor output has not fluctuated more than 0.5%. The energy they have expended so far it is like a mountain using a handful of pebbles. They are not fighting a battle of attrition. They are performing surgical removal. The concept settled over Tae-ho like a cold weight. The Accord fought with every ounce of strength, praying it would be enough. The humans fought with a reserve so deep the fight itself seemed trivial. On the Dayan, Chul observed the fleeing hive ship. They are attempting to jump to slipstream, Mi Kyung reported. They are gathering a charge. They will not be allowed to report, Chul stated, his voice finally holding a hint of something harder. A retreating enemy is a future problem. Target the hive ship's primary neural nexus. Use the MAC, low yield, pinpoint. The orders were executed. The magnetic accelerator cannon hummed again, a lower, quicker pitch. Another projectile, smaller but no less precise, flashed across space. It did not aim to destroy the ship. It struck a specific bulbous section amidships. The hive ship did not explode. Instead, every light on its surface died at once. Its engines sputtered and failed. It became a dead, drifting hulk. The synaptic web connecting the rest of the K-Thrak swarm to a central intelligence was severed. On tactical screens across the fleet, the thousands of remaining K-Thrak vessels, the fighters, the drones, the smaller skirmishers suddenly lost coordination. They drifted, turned on each other in confusion, or began mindless, random attacks. The heart of the swarm had been killed with a single, precise stroke dot. The effect on the Accord forces was immediate. A cheer, raw and full of released tension, erupted on the bridge of the Resolute. Jin felt a laugh bubble up in his own throat, a mix of giddy relief and overwhelming awe. They were saved. Actually, truly saved. But Admiral Taeho did not cheer. He watched the dead hive ship drift, and then he looked at the Dayan, a silent, gray monument of impossible power. The humans had not just won a battle. They had demonstrated a terrifying truth. They understood their enemy on a fundamental level, and they had built a tool to negate it completely. He opened the channel to the human ship again, his voice formal, carrying the weight of his station and his newfound caution. Captain Shul, this is Admiral Taeho of the Galactic Accord. On behalf of all the species of the Accord, we offer our profound gratitude. Your intervention has saved countless lives. On the screen, Shul gave a small, respectful nod. We are glad to assist, Admiral. Taeho hesitated, then asked the question that every being in the sector was thinking. Your technology. Your ship, we had no idea. Why reveal it now? Chol's expression remained neutral, but his eyes were serious. Admiral, a tool is only useful if it is used. We built the Dayan not to conquer, but to ensure we would never need to. Today, the need was clear. The K-Thrak threatened a peaceful coalition. That is a line we chose to defend. The answer was simple, and that made it all the more staggering. They had the power of a god and the restraint of a philosopher. As the channel closed, Taeho looked around his bridge at the celebrating Vel, Terrans, and others. Their joy was pure. His own mind was already racing ahead into a future suddenly and irrevocably changed. The galaxy had just gained a new protector. The question that haunted him, that he saw reflected in the eyes of his senior officers, was simple. What happens when a protector decides something else is a threat? The battle was over, but for the stunned onlookers, a new and more complex unease had begun. The silent arrival of the colossal ship had created a bubble of eerie quiet in the chaos of the battle. On the bridge of the GCS Resolute, Jin held his breath. The alien chatter in his ear was a mix of fear and desperate hope. The K-Thrak swarm, reacting to the new presence, had shifted. A wave of their attack drones, thousands of small, bony pods with glowing green cores, detached from the main fleet. They moved like a single-minded swarm of locusts, their trajectory a direct line towards the unknown vessel. Admiral Taeho clicked his mandibles, a sound of pure uncertainty. All vessels hold position. Do not engage the newcomer. Let us see what it is, or what it does. Inside the newcomer, the atmosphere was one of focused calm. The bridge of the Ans Dayan was a wide, low-ceilinged space lit by the soft blue glow of holographic displays and the warm amber of physical readouts. It smelled faintly of ozone, metal, and recycled air. At the center, in a command chair that looked more functional than grand, sat Captain Chol. His face was impassive, his eyes fixed on the main tactical screen, which showed the approaching drone swarm as a cloud of angry red dots. Report, Chol said. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the bridge. To his right, Mi Kyung, the tactical officer, responded without looking up from her console. Wave composition confirmed. 4,217 individual K-Thrak attack drones. Corrosive plasma projectiles, low yield. Threat to our outer armor is negligible. They will impact in 40 seconds. At the engineering station, Hane ran a final diagnostic on the point defense network. Grid is at 100%. Power routing is optimal. We are a green board, Captain. Chol gave a single slow nod. He did not stand up. He did not raise his voice. He had not come this far to be rushed. The Dayan was not just a ship. It was a statement. Its every bolt, every circuit, was the result of a simple human philosophy. If you must build a shield, build it so strong you never need to raise it. Today, the shield had to be shown. Point defense intercept, Chul ordered, his words clear and soft. Clear our approach. No grand gestures. Just clean the window. On the Resolute, Jin watched, his knuckles white on the edge of his console. The alien captains on the comms were whispering. They are just sitting there. The drones are almost in range. It's a derelict. A tomb. It has no power. Then the silent ship awoke. Across its angular gray surface, hundreds of small hexagonal panels slid open. From each aperture, an emitter pod rose with a smooth mechanical hum. There was no blinding light, no roaring sound in the vacuum. But a storm was unleashed. Tens of thousands of tungsten slugs, each no larger than a man's finger, were fired in a perfectly coordinated ripple. They formed a wall of solid metal, moving at a significant fraction of light speed. The cloud of K-Thrak drones met this wall. The result was not an explosion. It was an erasure. The drones did not blow apart in fiery balls. They simply came apart. They disintegrated into a fine, expanding mist of organic shrapnel and frozen coolant. One moment there was a swarm. The next there was a glittering, dissipating cloud of debris, backlit by the distant sun. The entire wave had been deleted in less than 2 seconds. The silence on the Accord command channel was now absolute. Jin realized he had stopped breathing. He forced air into his lungs, the sound loud in the stunned quiet of the Resolute's bridge. On the science station, Su Min let out a shuddering breath she hadn't known she was holding. Her instruments had captured it all. The precision, the rate of fire, the sheer computational power needed to track and assign a projectile to each individual drone in a chaotic swarm. It was impossible. Yet it had just happened. Point defense kinetic curtain, she whispered to Kaler, whose frills were clamped so tight to his head they were almost invisible. Theoretical. We have papers on it. They built it. Back on the Dayan, Mi Kyung nodded. Drone wave eliminated. No secondary debris threats. K-Thrak capital ships are re-evaluating. 2 of their hive ships are moving into a flanking position. Chol steepled his fingers. The demonstration was over. Now came the message. Open a channel, he said. Broadcast on all standard Accord military and emergency frequencies. Universal Translation Protocol. A light on Mi Pyung's panel glowed green. Channel open, Captain. You are live to the entire battlefield. Chul leaned forward slightly, towards the pickup. His voice, still calm and measured, now carried the weight of the ship behind it. Attention all vessels of the Galactic Accord. This is Captain Chul of the Allied human ship Dayan. We have analyzed the K-3 threat profile. We are engaging. That was all. The channel closed. On a dozen bridges, 100 translators worked instantly. The message was stunning in its simplicity. No request for permission. No declaration of war. No grand speech. A simple statement of fact. We are here. We are engaging. Before the words could fully sink in, the Dayan moved. Its massive engines, arrayed in clusters across its aft section, glowed a deep, resonant blue. It did not turn gracefully. It simply began to advance, pushing forward like a continental plate shifting. Its course took it directly towards the heart of the K-Thrak formation. where the two largest hive ships, pulsing with vile energy, were positioning themselves. The Accord ships, still scattered and wounded, watched. Admiral Te-Ho, on the Resolute, finally found his voice. "All units, pull back. Give the human vessel a wide berth. Observe and record everything." The K-Thrak were not idle. Incensed by the destruction of their drones and the ship's bold approach, the two hive ships unleashed their main weapons. Thick beams of virulent green energy, capable of melting through the toughest Accord armor, lanced out across the void. They struck the Dian's forward shields. Again, there was no cataclysmic explosion. The green beams splashed against an invisible, shimmering field that became visible for a moment, a hexagonal, honeycomb pattern of pale blue light flickering across the space in front of the human ship. The energy did not penetrate. It did not even seem to strain the shield. It was absorbed, dissipated, and bled away as harmless radiation. Inside the Dayan, the deck didn't even shudder. A soft chime sounded at Hana's engineering station. Shield integrity at 98%. Gravimetric dispersal is operating within nominal parameters. Redirecting excess energy to coolant loops. Chul allowed himself a small, tight smile. "Thank you, Hana. Mi Kyung, designate the lead hive ship. Prepare the primary magnetic accelerator. Single round. Standard yield. Aye, Captain. Targeting solution locked. MRC is charging." On the Resolute's viewport, Jin and the others saw a new structure on the human ship orient itself. Along the ship's central spine, a series of massive rings, glowing with a building white light, aligned. A deep, subaudible thrum began to transmit through space, vibrating through the hulls of the nearest Accord ships. It was a sound felt in the bones, not heard by the ears. The lead Kaithrag hive ship, sensing the buildup of impossible energy, began to turn, trying to present a smaller profile. It was too late. From the Dayan, there was a flash of light that left after images on every optical sensor. A single tungsten iron projectile, longer than a city bus, was hurled into the void. It was not propelled by chemical explosion, but by a sequential magnetic pulse that accelerated it to a terrifying speed. It crossed the distance in a blink. It did not impact the K-Thrak ship's shields. It passed through them as if they were not there. The sheer kinetic force overwhelming their biological energy buffers instantly. The projectile struck the heart of the hive ship. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the hive ship came apart. It did not explode outward. It seemed to compress around the point of impact before violently disassembling into millions of fragments. A cloud of organic and metallic debris bloomed silently where a capital ship had been. The second hive ship froze. The entire K-Thrak advance stuttered to a halt. On the Accord command channel, the silence broke into a cacophony of awe, relief, and terror. Jin sank into his chair, his mind unable to process the scale of the power he had just witnessed. It was not just a victory. It was a redefinition of what a warship could be. And it had come from the species everyone had politely underestimated. The stunned onlookers were no longer just staring at a battle. They were witnessing a revelation. The quiet hum of the GCS Resolute was the only sound of peace in a space filled with violence. On the bridge, Jin sat at his communications console, the faint glow of alien glyphs and tactical readouts washing over his face. His fingers danced over the interface, routing desperate signals, piecing together a battle that was falling apart. He was young, and the weight of every broken transmission felt heavy on his shoulders. Outside the panoramic viewport, the darkness of the Nixian expanse was lit by the cold, brief flares of dying ships. The K-Thrak swarm moved like a disease through the fleet of the Galactic Accord. Their ships were ugly, organic things, all pulsing purple veins and bony protrusions that spat globs of corrosive plasma. For every K-Threk vessel, that blossomed into a silent fireball. 3 Accord ships, sleek silver arrows of the Vel, or the crystalline spheres of the Terrans, were torn apart. Resolute, this is Starlight Scythe. Our primary drive is gone. We are venting atmosphere. Requesting immediate. The Vel captain's voice, a melodic but now strained chime, cut off into a hiss of static. On Jin's screen, the icon for the Starlight Scythe winked out. He marked it as lost, his throat tight. "Confirmed, Starlight Scythe," Jin said to the dead channel, his voice a low murmur. He didn't know if protocol demanded it, but it felt necessary. To acknowledge the end, from the command pit, Admiral Tai Ho, his insectoid body rigid with tension, clicked his mandibles. Reformed the defensive line on the marker. All remaining vessels, focus fire on the lead bioship. We must break their momentum. His translated words were firm, but Jin could hear the underlying tremor. It was the sound of a plan failing. Jin rooted the order. The responses were slow, scattered. A hope was leaking out of the fleet, replaced by a cold, dawning acceptance of defeat. He listened as a Terran commander, her voice usually like chiming glass, barked orders that were half prayer. He listened as a Vel navigation officer sang a death rite for his own ship. The Galactic Accord, a fragile union of a dozen species, was being dismantled piece by piece before his ears. And his own people, humanity, were conspicuously absent from the carnage. We're observers, he thought bitterly. Mid-tier members. Good at science, decent at trade, never first to a fight. Today, it seemed, they wouldn't be last either. 100,000 kilometers away. On the observation ring of the science station Orb of Insight, Su Min watched the same destruction through a different lens. Her screens showed not just light, but data. Energy signatures, gravitational ripples, Tachyon echoes. The battle was a horrific ballet of numbers going to zero. Fascinating, she whispered to herself, the word feeling immediately shameful. But it was. The K-Throk energy consumption patterns were inefficient, brutally so. They wasted power in terrifying displays that served no purpose but to intimidate. The Accord's responses were elegant, optimal, and utterly insufficient. Her assistant, a young Vel named Kaler, trembled beside her. His frills flushed a worried orange. "The third flank is collapsing, Dr. Su Min. The Admiral's ship will be exposed in approximately 4 minutes. "I see it," Su Min said, her voice calm. She had to be calm. The data required it. But inside, a cold knot was forming. She had friends on the Resolute. Jin was there. A new alarm, soft but insistent, chimed at her primary station. It wasn't a weapons signature or a ship identifier. It was a slipstream node activation alert from a dormant point near the gas giant Nix Prime. Something was coming through. Something big. Collar, focus all long-range scanners on node Theta 7. Maximum resolution. The data began to flood in. The energy output was wrong. It wasn't the bioplasmic surge of the K-Throk. It wasn't the clean fusion impulse signatures of the Accord. It was raw, powerful, and deeply layered. Gravimetric distortion spiked. Space-time around the node was bending under immense power. "What is that?" Kaler chirped, his frills now a stark white. "A K-Threk world ship? Their energy profile is not a match." "No," Su Min said, her eyes widening as more numbers scrolled past. "It's not. The mass is comparable to a small moon. The power output is. It's orders of magnitude higher than the entire K-Throk vanguard." A terrible, thrilling thought occurred to her. The only known technology that could theoretically create such a signature was in human research papers. Papers labeled classified, Dyson Kim theoretical applications. Back on the Resolute, Jin caught the shift in the comms. The despair was suddenly edged with a new, sharper fear. Unidentified contact. Node Theta 7. Massive signature. It's not our Accord registry. By the old songs? Look at the size of it. K-Thruk superweapon. It has to be. Admiral Tejo's voice cut through the panic. Silence on the command channel. Tactical, give me a visual. The main viewport shimmered, zooming in on the swirling blues and oranges of Nix Prime. Near its limb, space rippled like water under a hammer. Then it tore. The vessel that slid into real space did not emerge. It descended. It was a slab of darkness, blotting out the stars. As it cleared the slipstream turbulence, details resolved. It was all hard angles and flat gray armor plating, studded with sensor arrays and weapon ports. It glowed a dull, menacing red. No elegant curves, no organic shapes. It was a brutalist mountain of forged metal and focused intent. A collective breath seemed to be sucked from the bridge of the Resolute. This was no bioweapon. It was something else entirely. Accord High Command, this is Resolute. Jin transmitted, his training overriding his shock. We have visual on unidentified vessel. Origin unknown. Design unknown. It is now holding position at the edge of the engagement zone. The response from the scattered, embattled Accord Command was a symphony of confusion and dread. The Terrans theorized a new K-Throk evolution. The Vel feared a third, unknown predator, drawn to the blood in the water. Jin stared at the silent, monstrous ship on the screen. Its sheer presence had, for a moment, frozen the battle. The K-Throk swarm had paused its advance, reorienting towards the new object. A single desperate hope flickered in Jin's chest, immediately crushed by logic. It couldn't be. Humanity didn't build ships like that. They built freighters and exploration vessels. This thing was a declaration of war, carved from steel. On the science station, Su Min watched the same vessel, her instruments screaming. The power readings were confirming her worst and best suspicions. The gravitational field it projected was acting as a passive shield of staggering strength. The reactor output dwarfed anything in the Accord database. She ran a final comparative analysis, her heart hammering against her ribs. The result blinked on her screen. Architectural and energy. Signature, 98.7% probability of human origin. Designation, Planetary Assault Platform Class. Estimated threat profile, catastrophic. She leaned back, the breath leading her lungs. They had come, not as observers, not as refugees. They had come in a ship that broke every understanding the galaxy had of them. And as she watched, the first K-Throk attack drones, like a cloud of angry insects, broke from the main swarm and sped towards the silent gray mountain. The battle, and the galaxy's understanding of humanity, hung in the balance.